Hello everyone, so in the last video I introduced you to my process for creating a zombie self-portrait. It's the process that I use for pretty much all of my illustrations or fine art pieces that I create just for my own enjoyment. We went through 16 thumbnail sketches just to generate some ideas, and then we took 4 of those initial thumbnail sketches and turned them into small little gouache paintings just to refine those ideas a little bit more in terms of value and shape. In this video I'll be taking my favorite of the 4 gouache paintings and creating a fully fledged graphite drawing where I go into the really intricate shapes, the little half tones, little shadow shapes. I really think about the design of the features, the design of the hair, everything really. And in order to do that, I collect all sorts of different references. So I take photos of myself, I take photos of a little model of a skull that I have. I find references online all to do with zombies and how zombies have been done in the past, just to influence the design decisions within that graphite drawing. I do that graphite drawing basically to iron out any kinks, because in that final painting I just want to go from beginning to end, ideally without any issues. So this is basically a big step in the preparation phase. Once I've done my graphite drawing, I then print out 4 little thumbnail sized copies of that drawing. I make them a little bit lighter, and then I create 4 little color composition studies. So that's where I experiment with different color ideas, color combinations, and basically just find the best color combination that best suits the illustration I'm working on. Okay, so let's get into the video and we'll start with that graphite drawing. Thank you. This is the graphite drawing stage of my zombie self-portrait. The purpose of this stage is to refine my gouache painting as much as possible, focusing on the smallest halftone and shadow shapes. This drawing should answer every value, edge, and shape design question I might encounter before I start my final painting. I want to make sure that all kinks are ironed out to eliminate any potential issues that could arise later. Before the graphite drawing, I take time to shoot photo references that I might need and to find additional resources online that will help me design my shapes accurately so they feel realistic and believable. For this drawing, I first took a photo of myself to build upon. As you can see from the reference, I wet my hair so it appears dirty, and that's the look I want for that final zombie painting. I also photographed the skull so I could better understand the halftones within the teeth and how their shapes are structured. I also made sure to capture the intense facial expression I want my zombie portrait to have. When taking the reference photo of myself, I exaggerated my expression by widening my eyes to create a more aggressive, unsettling stare. This helped give me a stronger foundation to work from, ensuring the intensity of the expression comes through clearly in the final artwork. I then gather various resources online. For example, I found images of makeup artists' work on The Walking Dead, which helped me design the texture of the zombie's skin so it looked realistic and convincing. It's important to collect as many references as possible if your final goal is believability and grounding your work in reality. When I start my drawing, I'm focused primarily on placement, proportions, and shape design. I do my best to design shapes attractively during this phase. I want to avoid changing shapes once I push into the full value stage, because once those darker values are on the paper, it's very difficult to remove them. This entire procedure is a process of trial and error. It's not as simple as doing a graphite drawing of a more traditional portrait, although few people would call that simple. Here we have the added difficulty of transforming a normal face into a zombie, which requires a significant amount of invention and imagination. To invent this face in a believable way, I have to understand the forms, planes, and underlying anatomy of the head. I'm thinking about the skull constantly at this stage because I want the cheekbones, brow ridge, nasal bone, nasal cavity, and eye sockets to protrude, giving a sense of rot and decay in the flesh and revealing more of the skull beneath. In order to get across the idea of gradual rot and decay, I also need a strong understanding of aged skin and how to draw wrinkles. Often, artists make the mistake of drawing wrinkles as one hard line. They forget that wrinkles are small, subtle folds in the skin. They often have a hard and a soft edge depending on how the light affects them. I need to understand light well. Cast shadows, form shadows, halftones and highlights to convincingly render the invented flesh I'm adding to the piece. Good design is very difficult to teach. I find it's best learned through master studies. Copying the work of the masters allows you to gain an intuitive sense of strong shape design. I recommend studying artists such as Alphonse Mucha, J.C. Leyendecker and Dean Cornwell. These artists are what I'm trying to channel every time I design shapes. During the initial lay-in stage, when you're focused on shape design, you may need to shift things around and alter your designs frequently. This is especially true in a drawing that requires a lot of invention and on-the-fly decision-making. Be patient and don't settle for mediocrity. If a shape isn't working early on, no amount of value or edges will fix it later. It will only emphasize the issue. Once everything is properly proportioned, positioned, and clearly designed, it's time to introduce the full value range. When working in graphite, I like to build my values gradually. I typically use a HB pencil for my halftones, a 2B for the lighter shadows and darker halftones, and a 4B for the deepest, most dramatic shadows. You can always push the contrast even further by incorporating 6B or 8B pencils if you want richer, darker tones. I have no idea what the drawing will look like in the end. I only have my gouache study and a selection of reference images to guide me. I constantly refer to the gouache painting so I maintain a clear understanding of my large light and dark masses. When you're focused on tiny shapes, it's very easy to lose sight of the big ones. That's why I keep that gouache painting close. It's a less detailed map that keeps me grounded in the big read of the value structure. I constantly refer to my own photos and online references to make the drawing as believable as possible. I absolutely love this stage. It's incredibly rewarding to watch my simple gouache painting evolve into a highly detailed drawing. I put a lot of effort into this drawing, and I believe you should too in your preliminary work. I didn't always understand why illustrators invest so much time into developmental drawings and paintings, but the more experience I gain, the more I understand the purpose. To get the best final painting possible, you want to explore as many details as you can ahead of time. Yes, I could have spent half the time on this drawing. It took nearly 8 hours to complete. But I wouldn't feel the same level of confidence or conviction going into the final painting. The goal isn't to simply copy the drawing later, but having a strong drawing gives me the chance to create an even stronger painting. If you're not happy with the drawing at the end, keep working on it until you are. Or consider starting over with a different approach. No amount of colour or the transition from graphite to paint is going to save a poor drawing. After all, this drawing is what you'll refer to constantly for the final painting. I'm going to briefly interrupt this video just to let you know that there is currently over 50 hours of portrait painting and portrait drawing demonstrations available on my Patreon. In the painting demonstrations, we cover the basic palette from the phthalo blue, black and white palette, the burnt umber and white palette. Then we start to go a little bit more chromatic with the Zorn palette, and then eventually into the full color palette. I'm currently in the process of creating a drawing course. I'm releasing one drawing demonstration per week. That's where we go over the essentials of portrait drawing, because in order to be a good portrait painter, you need to know how to draw well. We start off with the Loomis head, going into the Riley method, the Asaro head, we go into the skull, we go into the individual features of the face, teaching you the anatomy and underlying structure of each feature. And then I lead you into a fully fledged drawing where we go into the initial laying of a drawing all the way through to the finished rendering. So if that's something that interests you, go to patreon.com/Lewis Meader and you'll get all this content and all of the upcoming videos for just £9.99 per month. So if you want to level up your portrait painting and drawing skills, follow the link in the bio to my Patreon. Thank you. I then move on to my gouache color compositions. In these paintings, I'm experimenting with colour variations and ultimately choosing one to take into my final piece. At this stage of the process, I'm thinking about various aspects of colour theory. Although honestly, I don't consciously rely on theory too much. I prefer to follow my gut and go with what feels right for the mood I want to achieve. Going into this, I didn't have a solid colour scheme in mind. I initially imagined a blood red background, and I thought it might be fun to lean into a stereotypical zombie palette by giving the figure green skin. The complementary relationship between red and green felt like it could be visually striking. Other than that, I didn't have many concrete ideas. So I just experimented. I tried out warm versus cool lighting scenarios, tested different variations of zombie skin tones, and even explored a softer, less intense green background. Eventually, I decided against the red background. It felt distracting and took away from the impact of the blood around the zombie's face, which I wanted to stand out clearly. The dark green background ultimately worked much better against the pale, cool skin and the red accents of blood. The contrast really makes those bloody areas pop forward. The cool lighting also helps the zombie appear more sickly and lifeless, something that definitely enhances the overall mood of the painting. I'm using gouache for this piece, but you could use any medium you like. I often use digital tools for the colour composition phase because of their convenience and time efficiency. I approach the colour composition stage with the same mindset and philosophy I bring to my initial thumbnail sketches. I don't want to limit myself to what I already know will work. This is the time to explore, experiment, and have fun with the different colour possibilities. After creating 4 colour compositions, I select the one that best supports the narrative and visual goals of the piece to carry forward into the final painting. At this point, I have a refined graphite drawing that clearly communicates my values, shape design, and edge control at a highly detailed level, along with a chosen colour scheme. With those foundations in place, I'm ready to begin my final oil painting, which I'll be showing you in the next video.